All right. Hello again, everyone. My name is Hannah Bennigsen with the LibraryNow team. I'm from NPL's Education Outreach Services. Thank you for joining our monthly drop-in series. The cool tool that we are talking about today, three cool tools actually, are the ways First Nations and ABC-CLIO's American Mosaic series, the American Indian Suite in particular. And all of these combine to be really awesome resources for integrating local American Indian history into your classroom. So we'll talk about how you can utilize these to help your students understand the language, culture, and stories of the Great Lakes region in which we reside. If it is your first time with us, just briefly, we'll go over what is LibraryNow. This is an easy-to-use website for students and educators to access LibraryNow resources with academic and recreational outputs. So first and foremost, a website, a curated best hits list of the hundreds upon hundreds of MPL resources, but curated specifically for the K-12 space for you and your students. And the way that we do this, if you are an educator at one of our LibraryNow partner schools, you can rest assured that every single student in your school automatically has access to the resources that we're going to talk about today. And when we partner with your school, we work to create automaticity in student login conventions as pertains to accessing LibraryNow. So if you're an MPS educator, this will be the S number, and we set the PIN to be the 4-digit birth year. If you are joining us from another LibraryNow partner, you can stick around afterwards for a refresher of your convention, but it is likely similar to what you see displayed on the screen. If you are an educator, you can access digital resources either with your teacher card, if you've ever gotten one of those from your closest branch location, or a digital educator card, and stick around in the Q&A if you'd like a refresher of how you can go about signing up for one of those. All right, and without further ado, let's get to our three features of today. So we'll be talking about the ways Wisconsin First Nations and ABC-CLIO. So the ways in Wisconsin First Nations in particular, and you can see Wisconsin is very clearly in the name. Both of these were created in compliance and to help educators meet the expectations of Act 31. And Act 31 is really a way of ensuring that school boards, schools, and the educators in them are cultivating an active appreciation, understanding of different value systems and cultures throughout all grade levels. And this really entails a commitment from schools to provide adequate instructional materials, texts, and library services. That's us as a supporter of you, which are reflecting the cultural diversity and pluralistic nature of American society. So the ways in Wisconsin First Nations are mobilized efforts to get you really creative materials, and they both kind of have direct reference to ways in which these resources can satisfy Act 31 clauses. And then ABC-CLIO is really MPL's commitment to culturally engaging pedagogy. There are thousands upon thousands of primary and secondary source documents that pertain to the 4 different suites that we have. And the collection of resources we'll be focusing on today is American Indian history and primary and secondary sources therein. So we'll take a look at how all 3 of these can combine in really cool ways, and each of them has something really distinct to offer you individually and in combination. So first and foremost, the ways posts this mission statement, which is explaining itself as a collection of language and culture stories for Native communities around the Central Lakes region to explore both traditional ways and contemporary customs of today, and supporting educators and meeting the requirements of Wisconsin Act 31. We're going to do some telling and then most of all some showing. So we'll go to LibraryNow and explore the ways for you live time today. But just as a little teaser, we'll be looking at the story component, which is really the juice of the ways, what the ways is known for. It's an opening question, really engaging video of actual humans to give you and your students kind of that face and that narrative to cling on to, and then corresponding discussion questions. There is educator guide that goes with each story, lesson planning resources that you can print out, a quick start chart if you're trying to decide which of the stories that you want to integrate, whether you want to integrate a certain tribe, a certain period of time, a certain individual, a certain area of ancestry and heritage, and then a few other invitations from PBS like classroom media and professional development. Wisconsin First Nations, very similarly, is a collection of resources that is providing educators and pre-service teachers with accurate and authentic educational materials for teaching about American Indian nations in Wisconsin. So again, strong emphasis on locality. You can see a few different renditions of maps, past, present, and growing. So tribal lands map that you can print for your classroom, current tribal lands map. And there's a rich discussion and resources that correspond with this notion of place-based education, teacher exemplars that make it real in terms of what living, breathing educators have done with these resources, and then some FAQs and definitions to help you and your students really ground yourselves in having the greater context to start, the foundation to start and dive in with the importance of language. And last but not least, ABC-CLIO. We'll probably spend the least amount of time in the drop-in today on ABC-CLIO, but I do want to plug quickly before I forget that we do have a YouTube channel that features an ABC-CLIO specific session. So if you see the 4 suites on the top there, we do a session that features all 4. But today we'll be looking at the American Indian Spirit experience specifically, and how you can search the databases to find a slew of different primary and secondary source documents for your students. Okay, without further ado, if this is your first time to LibraryNow, welcome. You're going to go to www.librarynow.org, and this is your roadmap. So today our resources can be found under teens and educators, but if it's your first time here, a lot of resource overlap between the 3 age categories. So if you're looking for a certain resource, you can look at a couple different places for it. Educators being the mother lode, because we want to provide you with additional PD resources too. But so you get a sense of what teens looks like, we'll use teens as the avenue to get to the ways. And here we are. So as I mentioned, stories is really the mother lode here in terms of what is going to be that rich, immediate source of integrating a story. It's in the name into your classroom. So for example, this language apprentice video, and all the videos are about 5 minutes. So you know they're a great plug and play or great starting point to be the fodder of dialogue in the classroom. So this one is about the Ho-Chunk language, and it has this opening question: how does language revitalization affect a community? You can watch the video itself. Again, this can be kind of a student-facing page, and then questions to consider, which you can pose to your students. A really rich emphasis on sense of place across all the resources. You'll see that. So where does this video come from? And are students familiar with it? Is really present across all of these. Graphics for you to include, and of course the production credits. But you will find the corresponding resource for you as an educator, specifically under educator resources. So you are able to find the educator guides by video. So for example, this is a different one, Clan Mother Healing the Community, and you're going to be able to download this. And you can use an essay instead of the video if you wanted to, though I, of course, am partial to the video. But then you can see the academic standards supported down here. Once again, that tie in to Act 31. That is so helpful. I also wanted to highlight this chart. Very clearly says begin here for if you are looking for a certain person, First Nation, location. And this, again, is a really helpful delineation of the standards supported. They're even linked here for social studies, ELA, and beyond. Educator guide, everything is linked right here for you. All right, and then 2 more invitations. We won't go into these too much because these are additional invitations from PBS, but this will take you away from the ways and into a lot of other really cool resources offered by PBS, a lot of games, mystery games, Wisconsin biographies, and more, and then professional development. You can see kind of the subsections there that you can access. All right. Moving along, we are going to go to, surprise, surprise, back to LibraryNow. And we are going to explore First Nations, which is located under the Educator tab. As a best practice of navigating, the eyes will always remind you of what each resource has to offer if you want to be refreshed. So here we are in Wisconsin First Nation. So you can see that they immediately commit to educational videos, professional development, and lesson plans. So if we go to explore all resources, two that were featured in our slide deck as well were ancestral land maps and current tribal nations maps. So you can select each of these. You can see the key here is a great way to see how this has changed over time. You can show counties and cities here or hide them. This is a great way to maybe have your students prompted to guess. Ask them, what tribes do you know that exist in Milwaukee, for instance? And then you can also look at what these look like in present day. You could have students in groups or as individuals choose a featured nation on here, and then together, hodgepodge, put together a map by the nations that we have represented in our state. As you can see, there are a few different ways for you to download the map, whether it's just the map, whether it's the facts, PDF to print and hand out to your students, and more. Going back to our homepage, a few more really amazing features. Place-based education. I want to navigate us here because you saw a hint of it in terms of sense of place emerging in the ways. So maybe you can sense a trend here. There's another poster that you can download. But I love this definition of place-based education as immersing students in local heritage, cultures, landscapes, opportunities, and experiences. And these are really the foundation across different subject areas. It doesn't have to stay in ELA and social studies. So this really helps students cultivate that understanding of where they live, of neighbors. You can see just a small clipping of prompting questions that really ground students in place, the poster, and then this is a really amazing, as you can see, PDF that you can download that gives you questions to prompt dialogue and individual reflection in your students. So what are tribal neighbors? Do they live near you? How do you find out? What are neighbors? How do we rely on our neighbors? What connections can you make between your culture and American Indian culture? So I love, love, love that these resources and that kind of lens of learning and making it personal exists, in addition to honoring the stories as the resource, the ways does. Another really where the rubber meets the road example of how First Nations really wants to make these resources applicable is it so often helps to have models and role models of, so I have these resources, where do I go from here? So you can see these are also videos. They feature how an educator or an administrator has been really innovative and creative in their approach and what that has been like for them. And what's so cool is that these are living, breathing resources, just like the tribal communities that we still have present in the state and in our country. So educators who are doing really cool things did and continue to do really cool things. And people that do really cool things and are passionate about the work that they do are open to sharing those things. So this is an interactive map. These are not personal addresses of any educators. It's the address of either the university or the K-12 school. But you can see all of these educators have agreed to share their contact information. So lots of opportunities to connect with the people behind these resources and not just see the stories featured of an individual, but to then take it the next step in expanding your network and really leaning on each other for inspiration. Last but not least, we are the library, so we have to talk about book lists. We love book lists. So these are Wisconsin First Nations book lists by age. Victoria in the chat will also link our MPL librarian curated Native American literature lists for you to reference. And quick plug for LibraryNow's Overdrive and Hoopla, our two digital collections. You are welcome to utilize your digital educator card, your access, your students' access to access these titles to use for any grade level that you are looking to engage. And last but not least, so many of these resources have really amazing ways of filtering. So you can see here on the left-hand side, there's a tribal lands map, but you can also see the resources that this has by tribal land, tribal affiliation, grade level over here, resource type, which is awesome. So you could look at Menominee for 3rd through 5th grade, and then you could say, I'm really looking for a video. And here you have it. Some of these operate a little bit like read-alongs too, and they have really interesting graphics. I love this one down here. So so much that you can do that. And oops, I forgot one more awesome feature, the FAQ, frequently asked questions, particularly about correct terminology or acknowledging what these different terms mean. So it says American Indian, Native American, or First Nations. How do you delineate between? And what is the spectrum? What is their contemporary and historical resonance? And what does it mean to be federally recognized? What is tribal sovereignty? What does this look like within the state of Wisconsin? Again, how do you empower students to start to have these conversations, especially if you are the one who's integrating these for your students for the first time? This is a great place for you and your peers to have a shared sense of language and ground yourself in that, but also encourage students in that and empower them with the knowledge and leading with the why behind why we use certain words. All right, and last but not least, ABC-CLIO, which is our newest LibraryNow resource. We are living and breathing as well as a web page, and we're always looking to continue to add and deepen in the resources that we have available. An example being culturally engaging pedagogy, as I said earlier, and ABC-CLIO being our first commitment to this. So right now we have 4 suites, and we hope to add more. We're going to look at the American Indian experience today. So brief nod to our academic success corner, because if you are having your students do primary and secondary source research for the first time, it's oftentimes helpful to ground them in what are primary sources? How do you work with them? What kind of critical thinking does that entail? You know, helping students understand that this isn't necessarily something that you as an educator, you as a student believe if you are integrating a resource that is marked by its time period, its language, and its visuals and whatnot. What is information literacy? What is the difference between primary and secondary source? And who is telling the narrative? So a lot of really cool resources for encouraging automaticity in learning and research, but the advanced search of ABC-CLIO really says it all. So you're able to search by type, so you can see the huge array of resources. Activities and topic centers will be kind of your educator home base there for lesson plan materials, but then students can also come to ABC-CLIO. That's why we have it on both the teens and educator tab, and they can do their own research or really deepen in their own passion for a certain subject area or point in time. So they can find all sorts of different primary sources here that they can pull in their projects. They can find time periods here, so a huge range up until the present. You can search by region, by state, and particularly for the topic of our drop-in today, by tribe. So also, in its own way, integrating that sense of place and making sure that we're not acknowledging that there's a monolith when it comes to certain identities, that there's huge geographic, cultural, historical differences that we want to honor and encourage students to hone in critically and thoroughly. All right, I'm going to navigate back to our presentation. And say that by the time I look at my clock, the time has always flown by. There is so much more. We know that you know your communities best, and we really hope that you will continue to explore LibraryNow, whether it's our digital collections like Overdrive and Hoopla, our resources Mango and Pronunciator, which can help with language learning and retention, movies, music, free tutoring, the Encyclopedia Britannica, and so much more. So please do stick around for the Q&A. Want to say thank you. We'll stop the recording and then we'll roll right into a few other announcements.